Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Missouri Association for College Admission Counseling Virtual College Fair. Thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited you're here. This session is all about preparing for college athletics. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items to note. First, if you have any questions at all, feel free to use the Q&A button to type in your questions to the presenters at any time. They are there, ready and available to assist and answer any questions you have. Your camera and microphone are off. You are muted and your video is off. The panelists can't see or hear you. This is one of many sessions happening. On Wednesday and Thursday, there will be actual college representatives here to share more information about their specific school. So feel free to sign up at the same place where you registered for this one. And lastly, this recording will be available a week from today at strivescan.com/Missouri. All sessions are being recorded. At this time, I'll get out of the way and introduce Allison Smith from Villanova University to kick us off.
Good evening, everyone. It's evening in Philadelphia, which is where I am. So it's a little bit darker here, so please excuse my kind of lower light. But my name is Allison Smith. I'm one of the assistant directors of admission at Villanova University, just about 12 miles outside of Philadelphia. We're kind of a medium-sized school, but we do have big-time Division I sports. You might have heard of our basketball team. They had a nice little run in March Madness. We wish they'd gone a little bit farther, but we were still so proud of them nonetheless. I actually ran track and field at Villanova. I'm an alum myself, and after I graduated, I spent about 6 years within our athletic department. I was our director of operations for track and field, as well as one of our assistant coaches. So I've been on a few different sides of kind of where you're sitting right now. I've been the recruited student athlete. I've been a student athlete, and I've also been on the recruiting coaching side, as well as my role in admissions, where I do presentations like this and talk to students just like you. So really thrilled to kind of be with you here today, answer your questions and help however I can. I'm here with two wonderful colleagues on the high school side. I will let them introduce themselves, but thrilled to speak further with you about this awesome world of athletics. So Corey, I'll kick it off to you next.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. My name is Corey Neslage. I'm the athletic director at Kirkwood High School in Kirkwood, Missouri, which is obviously a suburb of St. Louis. This is my 24th year in education. I spent 9 years as a head football coach and head girls basketball coach. I then moved on to another school in St. Louis, Mary Institute of Country Day School, where I was the associate athletic director, and I also coached football there. I was there for 5 years, and this is my 9th year as the athletic director at Kirkwood High School. I come to you with a couple different hats. Much like Allison, I was a collegiate athlete myself. I played 2 sports at a small college. I played football and baseball. And I'm going to show my age here a little bit older than Allison, but I've got 2 kids of my own. I currently have a senior in high school who has gone through the recruiting process. And as much as I hate to say it, he's kind of still involved with it. And then I've got another son who will be a freshman next year in high school, who is also a multiple sport athlete, playing football, basketball, and baseball as well. So I look forward to answering any of your questions. Hopefully we will be able to provide you with some information that will help you tonight.
And then last but not least, Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy Burrison. I'm the Director of Counseling at Lutheran North Middle and High School, a school in St. Louis, Missouri. Been a high school counselor. This is my 22nd year. And one of my primary responsibilities at Lutheran North is making sure our high school athletes who are being recruited and hope to continue to play their sport in college are successful in terms of being eligible. So have a lot of experience with what those eligibility requirements are, and looking forward to sharing some information with you tonight.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my slideshow. Anyone who has a question, please feel free to drop that in the Q&A, and we will get to those as we roll through. All right. Hopefully everyone can see this. These are kind of our little bios that we just kind of went through, and an alternate picture of what everyone looks like. All right. So first up, I think, Cindy, this is your territory.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the first 3 slides here. We've got maybe a dozen slides to share with you tonight. I'm going to talk just a little bit about playing sports in college. It's not just about having the athletic ability to play at the collegiate level. Sometimes we have students who think, oh, I'm really good, and so therefore I can play. But it really takes 4 things. It takes that athletic ability so that a coach wants you on his or her team, but it also takes the correct classes, grades, and test scores to be able to be eligible to play. So unfortunately, not every high school athlete that could play in college is eligible to play. And so some don't get that opportunity if they're not aware. So we're glad you're with us tonight, and hopefully we can help you understand this process a little bit better. So I want to talk just for a minute about the 2 bodies that kind of control collegiate athletics, if you will, the 2 organizations. So there's the NCAA. Most of you are very familiar with that. We just finished March Madness last night. Most of us watched the game and saw Baylor win their title. So NCAA has 3 divisions, Division I, Division II, and Division III. And then there's another organization called the NAIA. That is also another grouping of schools, and that's another sports category there. Those are typically small to mid-sized schools, but you should know that the NAIA schools can also offer scholarships just like the NCAA schools can as well. I'm going to talk just for a minute about their requirements to be eligible to play sports in college. NCAA has Division I and Division II. Those 2 levels can offer scholarships. They have Division III. In Division III, you're a student athlete, and those schools do not offer any money in the name of athletics. So there may be other opportunities to receive scholarships, but not in the name of athletics. So Division I are the big schools, the schools that just played in the tournament, for example. Division I are usually the larger schools, division schools, somewhat smaller to mid-sized schools. And then D1 and D2 schools can offer money for you to play. But to be eligible, you have to have 16 units of core courses. What does that mean? 16 units is like a year. So a year-long history course is 1 unit in history. Some schools, if you give grades on the semester system, you would be calculating 32 semesters. So you can calculate it either way, it comes out to be the same. So you need 16 units or 16 years in core classes. So the NCAA will recalculate your GPA. They will use no pluses and minuses, and they will look at classes only in English, math, science, social science, and foreign language. So those PE, health, fine art, practical art, those sorts of classes aren't going to help you be eligible. So if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, you really need to be focusing on those core classes and the grades that you're getting. In addition to meeting core class requirements of having 16 units, and we have links here to the Eligibility Center. You can see exactly what the requirements are. So it's foreign English. You just have to go through and see what the exact ones are. I'm not going to break that all down for you right now. And then along with your core classes, you need to have a minimum GPA. Right now, that minimum GPA for our current seniors is a 2.3 core GPA in those 16 units. If you've earned more than 16 units or 32 semesters, then you can get to play the pick and choose game. So if you have extra math classes, you could pick your best ones, and that can be of benefit to you. So it helps to take more classes than just what's required. Up until COVID hit, the other requirement was a corresponding ACT sum score. So they take your English, math, reading, and science score, add them up. That's your sum score, and you had to have a corresponding ACT score to match your GPA. With the COVID pandemic, the ACT score has been waived for this year's seniors. Those of you listening that are younger, we don't know what's going to happen, so you should plan on taking your standardized test because there's a good chance it could come back into play for you. Division II has a 16-unit requirement or 32 semester core classes also. Their GPA is a 2.2, slightly lower. They also use a sliding scale with the ACT. There is a lot of detail to these requirements that you can find at eligibilitycenter.org. If you're a 9th or 10th grader, we encourage you to set up a free profile page at the NCAA website. If you're 11th or 12th grader, if you're interested in D1 or D2 or you're being recruited at level, you have to set up a certification page. So you can find those details on that website. The last group of schools is the NAIA group, and their eligibility requirements are slightly different. You have to meet 2 of the 3 requirements on the screen. So either a composite ACT score of 18. So if you take the ACT 4 times, as long as one of them is an 18, you're good. 2.0 cumulative GPA, so that's all of your classes, or graduate in the top half of your high school class. If your schools don't rank, you have to use the first 2 requirements. And then you can see that the website there, playmynaia.org, you can get a lot of information from that website as well. If you want to go to the next slide, Allie. So this is going to be small to read, but there is a grade calculator at the NCAA website. If you go to the eligibility center site, this is one that my school uses. I know it's small to see, but we put in, how many semesters of math, English, science, social studies that they need. It calculates it out. It's nice if you look at these your freshman and sophomore year and kind of plan what you're going to take, see what grades you have, and calculate your core GPA at the end of each semester. So you see where you are and how close you are to meeting those requirements. So you can find these online, you can find it at the Eligibility Center, or better yet, meet with your high school counselor, okay? And I think I've got one more slide. Just wanna, maybe it's a little dose of reality here for students and parents online, that there are so many high school athletes out there that are very successful, and it's a huge part of their high school experience to play sports. But the reality is that a large percentage of those high school athletes will not go on to play in college. So you can look here at the stats. So for basketball, for example, there are 540,000 high school basketball players across the United States, 18,000 who make it on to play at the collegiate level. And of those 52, they get drafted to play pro. So you can see here that 1 to 2% of undergraduate students in bachelor degree programs actually receive sports scholarships. So I think if you enjoy your sport and you want to go on, that's great to pursue it, and we're going to help you do that, but also be a little realistic and make sure you're looking at schools that will meet your full need in terms of your academics and what you want to study to meet your needs for athletics as well as academics. So hopefully that's a little bit to whet your appetite about eligibility. And I'll turn it over to Allie and Corey now.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. So how to know, what the right school is for you? How do you know what a good fit is? And I think that's a question we're not only asking for athletics, but it's asking us for, our goals in general. How do I know if this is going to be a good fit for me? It's easy to want to start with, do they want me? So, and that's kind of the back end of that puzzle. And I think the better question to start with is this a place that's going to help me achieve my goals? What are your goals? Do you want to go to a school that's going to be the best academic school that you can play at? Do you want to go to a school that is the highest ranked in your sport? Do you want to go to a school where, you might not get as much playing time, but it's at a higher level? Or would you rather go to a school where you're going to play all of the time and be kind of the biggest fish in the pond? So that kind of big fish, small pond kind of analogy is a really helpful thing that I often talk about with students. Do you want to be the best player on the team, or do you want to be kind of, lower in the ranks, but, be part of a really great team? So that's kind of that searching that, you might want to consider doing. Doing your research is going to be a huge part of this. Doing research on the schools that you're looking at, doing research on, your sport itself. So many different sports have different timelines for recruiting, and kind of knowing how that process works will help form expectations as you're moving forward. Should you be, expecting to start having those conversations junior year? Should you be expecting to have those conversations senior year? I know with track and field particularly, we start having those conversations a little bit later than a lot of other sports. So it's kind of good to know how that timeline is going to work for you to kind of assess whether that fit is going to be right for you. Another one, I have one on here. How do they treat their athletes? It's always good to have a conversation, with other athletes on that team at that school. That's always helpful, but, all situations are unique. So doing research on yourself, what your goals are, doing research on the school, what's that environment like, what's the skill level like, and then doing research on kind of, what your academic goals are. Where do you want to be academically? If sports don't work out, is this a place you would like to be? So that all kind of gets wrapped up into, is this a good fit for me academically, personally, and athletically? And there's a bunch of other factors that we can talk about as far as recruiting, but we'll go into that on another slide. But this is kind of a bigger picture idea of how to know whether this is maybe a good fit for you. Corey, I'm not sure if you want to talk about this at all, if you've kind of been through this part of the process on looking for the right fit as far as schools go.
No, you pretty much covered it all, but and you hit on this. Sometimes kids get wrapped up in, well, I'm going to play this sport, so I'm going to make myself be happy at that university. The thing that I've said to all the kids that I've coached and have been recruited, you've got to think about yourself being at that school without the sport, and I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. And I think sometimes kids, they don't think about that because they just think, well, I'm gonna be involved in this sport for 4 to 5 years. And sometimes life has a silly way of playing itself out, and you've got to ask yourself the question: will you be happy at that school without playing the sport?
Very great advice. Okay. So now on to the kind of recruiting part of this. So you've done that research on yourself, you know kind of what you're looking for out of these schools, you know kind of where your level of play is, and now you're kind of go out and figure out how to get noticed by these schools. So the first thing that I always tell students is to complete the questionnaire on the college website. I know for us at Villanova for track and field, we have a recruiting questionnaire listed right away at the top of the website. And that is the easiest way for coaches to be able to go in and find your information, find your contact information, maybe find some highlights. But I usually tell students to follow that up with an email, because someone might be going in there once a week and doing a sweep of that. Someone might be going in there once a day. A lot of these college programs might have different, staff volumes. Again, for track and field specifically, we had a staff of 6, but there are schools like LSU and Kentucky that have a staff of 20. So you don't really know kind of what the staff volume looks like and who's going to be in there and looking at that stuff. So it always helps to follow up your, demonstrated interest with your questionnaire with an email to say, hey, I'm so-and-so from where and where, and I filled this out. And that way they know to go look for it. And it's not just kind of a flash in the pan to show you really are interested. So that's usually step 1. I'll touch on social media a couple times because I do think it's both helpful and at times harmful. Sometimes a good way to know if a college coach is interested in is if they follow you on social media. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes coaches will do that. So that's sometimes an easy way to kind of key in and say, oh, hey, the coach at school XYZ followed me back. So they must be interested. But kind of a double-edged sword, because sometimes what you're putting out there on social media might not be helpful towards your brand as a student athlete, So make sure we're being really mindful about what you're putting out there about yourself on social media, because if college coaches are using that as a way to recruit you, you want to make sure that kind of what you're saying and doing is aligning with kind of who they might want on their team. The team vibe is very important. You can also look at what their athletes are doing on social media and see if that would maybe be a good fit for you as well. Again, this goes back to research. If it's out there to be found, it always helps to look for that stuff. So once you've done that questionnaire, once you've gone through that process, you might start getting phone calls. Always good to know, who is calling you? Is the head coach calling you? Are they calling you a lot? Are you always calling them or trying to call them? Is it an assistant coach? Some schools, different coaches might recruit for positions. Some might do by, region in the United States. Our sprint coach recruited our sprinters, but I myself, as director of operations, was recruiting kind of 100-meter runners. So you don't always know who's doing the recruiting for different things. So when you send that initial email, always helps to do your research and figure out who might be the best person to send that email to. Make sure you're asking good questions. We, as the coaching staff, don't always want to, be starting from the top. So it always helps to show that you've done a little bit of work on your end to know kind of what the school is looking for in student athletes. For us, we have walk-on standards listed on our website, so you kind of know baseline right away what it takes to walk onto the team. Some schools might even have scholarship standards as well. So that's a great way to kind of gauge where you would fall within that profile, whether or not you would be that big fish versus that small fish. So that can kind of help with expectations. But even if you're not quite there, still worth a question, still worth an email to see if that might be something that you could work towards. Showing that competitive, coachable spirit. I know for us, we are always looking for student athletes who are, competitive, coachable, want to get to that next level, want to be, great in the classroom, great people, great parts of our community. All of that can come through in your conversations with coaches, in your social media, in your emails. All of that stuff is really important. But also keep in mind, coaches might be interested, but not all levels of interest might be the same. So again, that comes back to how often are they calling you and who is calling you. So always helps to kind of gauge that interest that way. And I'll talk about official versus unofficial visits a little bit later, but for Division I, that can also be a great way to gauge interest as well, is whether you're offered an unofficial visit, which might be you're paying all of your own expenses, versus an official visit, which you get 5 and they're paying for you to come on their dime. So that's kind of a very quick overview of how to get noticed, some do's and don'ts. Corey, I might let you jump in a little bit and see if there's any more items we can flesh out here.
Yeah, there's a couple things on that same slide, tips from a high school coach parent, and that would be me, because I'm living this right now. There's a handful of bullet points there, and I'm going to share probably 2 or 3 things that I've learned. And I'm speaking to you more as a dad right now of a multiple sport athlete who has had a lot of success in all 3 sports. The number one thing that I would pass on to parents to tell their kids that are wanting to play a collegiate sport, be the absolute best version of themselves on a day-to-day basis. And that means you're doing the right things in the classroom. You're doing the right things outside the classroom. You're being the best teammate you can be. You want to try to put yourself in a position to hold a leadership role within your team, be the captain of your team. The other thing that I would strongly encourage, and yes, there are people there that you can use as resources, but my older son, who's a senior right now, he's a very reserved young man. He's very conservative. As I look back on his experience, there's some things that I regret as his dad, because the social media craze was just starting to ramp up when he was getting into high school. And I kind of put the brakes on him to advocate for himself through social media. And looking back on that, I probably made a mistake, because you as the athlete, and Alice and Allie hit on this, as long as you're doing it the right way, you have to advocate for yourself as a student athlete. There's a lot of kids out there that want to play at the next level. So the question you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do to differentiate yourself from everyone else? And some of those things that I hit on are be a great student, be a good athlete, and you have to advocate for yourself on a daily basis. And Allie, if I could add one more thing,
Yeah.
And there's a bullet point there. And the other thing is too, and Allie said it depends on the sport a little bit, but you want to try to get yourself in front of the decision makers as much as possible. If that means you've got to go to camps, you need to go to showcases. And I'm saying this to you as a dad, I would have not said this 5 years ago. My son is going to play college football. I was under the impression what you do on Friday nights when the real bullets are flying would be enough. And after going through the process, I'm not sure if it is enough. So you want to get yourself in front of the decision makers that are going to decide if they're going to offer you a scholarship as much as possible.
Oh, great advice. Great advice. Okay, moving on in the interest of time. So how has COVID-19 affected this process? Cindy, I'm not sure if you wanted to touch on this at all, but you talked about it a little bit about test scores being temporarily waived, some different changes to kind of the way classes are evaluated. So they've got your back in this. So everything will be communicated in time. We've got a question in the Q&A about whether the NCAA will lift their COVID restrictions on coach contact visits soon. This is something I kind of wanted to touch on earlier. You don't need to be the expert on the rules. The coaches will be the ones that will let you know all of that stuff. There are different restrictions on when coaches can contact you, when you can visit, when they can visit you, etc. That's their job. They will know. So don't worry about breaking rules, because those rules are for them. Those rules aren't for you. So it's good to know the rules just to kind of manage expectations if you're wondering why someone's not getting in touch with you or why someone's not coming up to meet you after a game. Sometimes they're not allowed to do that at a certain point, depending on how old you are. So those coaches are going to be the ones that can tell you when those rules are lifted, when those restrictions are lifted. So it's good to kind of reach out, ask those questions, because they will tell you and communicate with you what they're able to. So definitely good stuff to keep in mind. Yeah, and sorry, Cindy asked you if you wanted to comment, and then I kept talking.
Yeah, I think, we commented on the fact that for this year, the test scores were waived. The NCAA also allowed some greater opportunity for students to take some classes in the summer, extended that. So I would just say, if you're a senior, you're obviously probably well aware of the requirements and the test score that's not required. If you're an underclassman, I really think you need to keep in mind that you should be working on a good standardized test score and checking out what the sliding scale is like, because there's a very good chance that the NCAA will reinstitute a requirement of a standardized test score. At least until we hear they're not, we have to assume that it could be. And so you can't minimize the importance of that. For those who don't understand, just in 30 seconds, the higher your GPA in those core classes, the lower the ACT sum score can be, and vice versa. If you test really well and your ACT score is pretty good, then your GPA can be a little bit lower. Never below that 2.3 for D1 or 2.2 for the D2. So excelling in both those areas obviously sets you at a good position, but at least in one, the GPA over the test score is helpful. And I would encourage you to start testing early, maybe summer after sophomore year, a couple times in the junior year, or 1 or 2 in the senior year, if you're trying to reach eligibility, because the NCAA will super score your test, and that just means they'll pull out your highest score, whether it's from multiple test dates or not. So it's to your advantage to test more than once until you know whether or not the NCAA is going to require that for your year. So
Great, thank you. And schools are also, still kind of up in there a little bit. I know for us at Villanova, we're test optional next year as well. So some schools might be doing things differently, but always good to, again, do your research on the schools you're applying to and what they might be asking of you. Okay, so what are the next steps? Cindy, like you were saying, don't wait, focus on your classes now, make sure all of your ducks are in a row. You don't want to be looking back when it comes time to be recruited and, wish you had done a little bit more. Now, a lot of the times schools will have a read done by admissions before they bring you to campus. I know at Villanova, in order to come for an official visit, we need to see your transcripts, test scores. If, we're asking for them, if this was, a couple of years ago, we need your transcripts and test scores in order to do a pre-evaluation to make sure you would be admissible before we bring you to campus, because we don't want to, set expectations, have you come, fall in love with the school, coaches love you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then maybe you're not in a place to be admissible by the university. So again, look at the school that you're applying to, ask those questions. Schools do it differently. That's not necessarily a requirement. That's just the way we do things. And I think other schools do too, but it might not be universal. So definitely focus on those classes and make sure you're in a position to attend any school that you would want to attend. Because again, different schools are going to require different things of their student athletes coming in. So your coaches can help you navigate that process. The coaches recruiting you can help navigate that process. Again, you aren't expected to know everything. You just need to know the right questions to ask. So I think that's a big thing to kind of take away from this presentation, is knowing what you should be asking rather than thinking you have to know everything before you get there on day one of your visit day campus. So Cindy, you mentioned setting up your free profile page at the NCAA. That's a great place to start as well for D1 and D2. Start meeting those high school counselors. I'm sure a lot of them are going to be asking you to meet with them soon. Cindy, I'm sure that's the case for you. Start meeting with people nice and early. And Corey, maybe this is something you could touch on a little bit, maybe like films, camps, research, networking. At what point in the process do you kind of see or did your son start doing all of that stuff?
Time frame wise, you start, as soon as you get varsity level film, obviously the sooner the better for that. But as soon as you get varsity level film, I would suggest that you start putting together a quote unquote highlight video and getting that out either on social media or sending that to schools that you're interested in from the beginning. But I would say yes, sophomore year. or for some that may be their freshman year, as soon as they get that varsity footage.
Great. And then I mentioned a little bit about official versus unofficial visits. And again, that's the difference between a school paying for you to come and you paying your own way to come. It's a great way to gauge interest. It's a great way to meet the team. For those official visits, you have 5 of them. For unofficial visits, it's absolutely unlimited if you're willing to pay your own way to come and visit that campus. So both of those are great to ask coaches about, good things to know about, and a great way to help you navigate this process. And then lastly is that national letter of intent. This is the document that ends the recruiting process. So if you are getting a scholarship of any kind, because not all scholarships are full rides. Sometimes people hear scholarship and they think, oh, I'm getting the full kit and caboodle, but a scholarship could just be, you know, a little bit of money or books or fees, something like that. So schools can break up scholarships a little bit to be, you know, anywhere from 75%, 25%, however they want to do it. So anyone receiving a scholarship would sign a national letter of intent saying that they're going to be receiving that scholarship for the next year, and that would end the recruiting process. So say you sign that national letter of intent and you elect to go to a different school, that would be kind of breaking that contract, and you need to sit out a year. So make sure you really know that's where you want to be if you're ready to sign that national letter of intent. But once you have, schools are not allowed to contact you anymore. So all of the craziness of being recruited kind of ends once you've signed on that dotted line, which is usually a huge relief for everyone involved. So I know we went through that pretty quickly. Here are some nice research guides that you can use in the process. We are right at about 30 minutes. So we did it, everyone, in the time frame that we set for ourselves. So at this point, I think we can open it up to questions. I know we went through a lot of that information really, really quickly. And I won't kind of land on this questions page too much. I'll kind of maybe stop sharing so that we can all be on the screen again. But yeah, I think I answered one in the chat already about lifting COVID restrictions. So hard to say. I don't work for the NCAA, so I don't really know kind of when that would be, but your coaches that you're talking to would be a great resource to let you know when those will be up. And a coach can absolutely tell you that if you ask them, or at least what information that they have. And the second question related to that communication with a coach after completing that questionnaire. I personally always liked when students would send me a follow-up email saying that they completed that questionnaire, because it let me know to go look for them. Because usually in that email, they might say some of their personal bests, maybe include a highlight reel. I can look at that right away, and then I'll know to go look for their stuff in our recruiting software rather than having to go and input it in myself. So that's kind of a great 1-2 punch when you're doing that process. So I do recommend that for students. Any other questions?
Allie, I do have one more comment to make. When we're talking about the 16 units, those core courses, if you think if you're a freshman or sophomore or a parent listening to this and you just say, I don't know, my kid loves the sport or I love the sport and I just don't know if I'm going to play D1, D2, NAIA, whatever. I think it would be helpful to go in and look at those requirements. I'm just going to use math as an example. So you might say, okay, I'm sophomore year, I'm going to take my 3rd year of math next year. But if you don't look closely at those requirements, if you started in pre-algebra in high school for some reason, that's fine. But the NCAA only counts algebra 1 and higher. So to get your 3 years of eligibility or 6 semesters in math, you would need algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2, or whatever the sequencing is in your high school. The second thing is you can go to the NCAA Eligibility Center website and you can see what courses are approved from any high school. So there may be a history elective course in your class that isn't approved as an NCAA course. So in other words, what I'm saying is not every course in your high school has to be a course that the NCAA has approved for eligibility. So that would be a wise thing for you to check either on your own or to meet with someone, your athletic director, or probably your high school counselor who could help you. But it's never too early to kind of plan those things now and not make your senior year too stressful because you had to get this class or the other class, or you have to get a certain GPA in them. So just some advice.
That's great advice. I think I say this with everything that I talk about with when it comes to college, whether it's essay writing workshops or asking for letters of recommendation, start that process as soon as you can, even just if it's the idea phase, even if it's just you making, notes in your phone. Say you're standing in line for a movie when we're allowed to go back to movie theaters again, and you have an idea for an essay, or you have an idea of a school that you'd like to look at, or if you, have an idea of, a class schedule. I think just keeping that kind of, awake dream journal tracking in your phone is really helpful, because if you're sitting down, you're like, oh, I can't remember what I wanted to look up when I got home. That's a really good thing to have to kind of look back on. Yeah, I tell that to students in essay workshops all the time. So it's helpful.
And
helpful
I think I only have one more thing to add. I think too, everybody wants, we just watch the tournament. Everyone wants to play for, the Baylor or the Gonzaga of the world, right? And but I think it's good to kind of look at all levels of play, and kind of, as Allie and Corey spoke, what's that priority? Is it really to just have that collegiate athletic experience and you want to play anywhere, or you only, if you don't get D1, then you're not going to play at all? So I always encourage student athletes, especially, as they're looking sophomore, junior year, look at some D1 schools, look at some D2 schools, look at NAIA schools, because for a lot of our athletes, the goal is simply to help pay for school, right? Do something I love and help pay for school. And maybe you won't get as much money at a D1 school, but maybe at a D2 or an NAIA school, you could get a little more money. So I would just say, keep your options open, and don't limit yourself just to that one dream school. And there are lots of schools out there that can probably be a good fit for you academically and athletically.
That's great advice, Cindy. And, I think it goes hand in hand with, how much do you want to play? If the sport is what you want to, be there for, do you want to go to a place where you're going to get to play all of the time? I've talked to friends who went to a certain school, didn't get to compete that much, and, wish they'd gone somewhere maybe a little bit smaller where they could have had way more field time. And I think it cuts both ways. So I think, again, just doing that soul searching, priority searching, and kind of knowing that Division I isn't necessarily the be all end all across the board. I had a coach that used to say all the time that when you come to college, you can focus on, there are three things you can focus on: athletics, academics, and your social life. And there comes a time when you realize you have to pick two. And I think you can start having that conversation with yourself even before you get there. So if it's, athletics and your social life, if it's social life and academics, you kind of just have to know kind of what your pie chart, what your values are, what your pie chart should look like. And that can kind of sometimes help you figure out kind of the better fit for you as well. So all about making sure that kind of what slice of that is going to get eaten up when you start picking schools. Any other questions?
I don't see any. We don't need to keep anybody any longer if there aren't more questions. But if you have a question, please drop it in the Q&A. We'll give another minute or so to see if we can answer anything.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for coming out today and chatting with us. I know we can't see you, but it is nice to be able to speak with students after, I know personally for me, I've just been reading applications, so this is fun. All righty, well, thanks again. And Cindy, it was a pleasure. Corey, I can't see you, but it was a pleasure to chat with you as well. I'm not sure if he's still here.
I am.
Oh, he's here. Okay. And yeah, thanks. Thank you one more time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. We'll go ahead and end this session a bit early, but that's okay. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here, for all the information and the advice that was shared. So helpful to so many, and so we thank you. This does conclude the end of this session, and so thank you to each of you for joining us. As we close, there'll be a very quick 4-question survey that will appear. If you don't mind taking a moment to fill that out for us, your feedback will be greatly appreciated. Again, there are more sessions happening, so feel free to sign up for more sessions where you registered for this one. You get to hear directly from college representatives sharing information about their school on Wednesday and Thursday. And lastly, this recording will be available a week from today. All sessions are being recorded and can be accessed at strivescan.com/Missouri. Again, thank you all, and I hope you have a great night.